Welcome back, everybody. It is another episode of Candidly with Coffee, but this one is quite different, actually. It's just me today. I am solo. The last time I recorded a solo podcast, we're in between studios. For those of you who might be new to my show, Candidly with Coffee podcast, I usually host it with my husband, but this is solo. The episode that comes out on Friday will be in our brand new studio. So I'm very, very excited about that. Coffee shop vibes is what I was going for. And I'm super excited. But anyways, today is a little bit different. I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to record or if I was just going to skip a day altogether. But then, I started to think about the topic that I want to cover today. It is about navigating very difficult, toxic relationship with a narcissist parent. And it is, hopefully by sharing my story, this might help, one of you out there who, maybe going through something similar. Whether it's a partner, a family member, a parent, whether it's, dealing with learning how to forgive and how to process trauma in some regard, I'm thinking maybe my story might help. I have been going back and forth with whether or not I was going to share the latest update, but then I thought about this time last year, I shared, a lot of what had happened initially. I actually got a huge response to when I shared my experience dealing with and going no contact with a narcissist father, which is my dad. It has now been 13 months. And I shared then, so I thought it only makes sense for me to share now as well. Why now would I choose not to share? Anyways, I hope that it helps. It's going to be difficult for me. It is, I'm diving into something deeply personal, but I know many of you may resonate with it on some level. Forgiving someone who has hurt you deeply before it's too late is what we're talking about today. And for me, this is about my father. You guys know that Mike and I embarked on our HRT and peptide journey last year, and we are absolutely loving it. It's been a game changer for both of us. And if you've ever wondered why you should consider HRT or peptide therapy, let me break it down for you. Everyone's needs are unique. That's why Transcend is all about creating a personalized plan just for you. They'll start by evaluating your blood work, taking into account how you feel and what your goals are, and then help you find a solution tailored to optimize your health and wellness. What makes it so effective? It's targeted treatment, finally address specific deficiencies and imbalances that might have been holding you back for years. Boost your body's natural functions. These therapies can kickstart and support your body's processes, giving you that extra edge. Enhance your well-being. Imagine boosting your mood, increasing your energy, and just feeling better overall in your day-to-day life. And lastly, longevity. It's not just about feeling good now, it's about supporting healthy aging and preventing chronic conditions down the road. Transcend will guide you every step of the way. So if you're ready to take your health and energy to the next level, start your own HRT or peptide journey with Transcend today. Remember to use our link www.transcendcompany.com/ESCO Elite, 15% off for new patients. Who, in his own struggles, he became a toxic and narcissistic presence in my life. Many of you who've been following me for a while do know, what happened and how that all transpired. So I did share it here. Despite all of that, I have found a way and a path to forgiveness, and I wanted to share that journey with you. Not to romanticize the pain, but to show you how we can find freedom through forgiveness, even if that forgiveness comes in a complex and bittersweet way. But to give you some background, especially if some of you who are new here, back in 2021, I lost my mom. Shortly after my mom passed, my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. Naturally, I stepped up to take care of him. I lived down the street. We lived close. So I thought that this is something that I needed to do. But losing my mom seemed to amplify his narcissism to a crazy degree. I mean, when she was alive, he controlled her every move during their life together. And without her, his behavior reached new heights of manipulation and rage that I never thought possible. The toxicity was unbearable for me. It chipped away at my mental health. It impacted my relationships with my kids, my ability to earn income for my family. I hit a breaking point last year. I made the decision to go no contact. At that time, it was absolutely the right choice for me. I really had no other choice, and I still stand by that. Those first 8 months, you guys, oh my gosh, I felt free. I felt like I was able to breathe for the first time in 2 years. I also felt like I was able to properly grieve the death of my mom. I was no longer walking on eggshells. I was no longer enduring the psychological warfare. It felt like freedom. Like I got my wings. I got my life back. And honestly, like my life kind of thrived there for a while. It's like I had a new lease on life. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten until I stepped away. Oh, man. But as the anger started to fade, a sadness has settled in. You know, I've been trying to ignore it for some time. I always say it's so much easier sometimes to stay mad because sadness is harder, you know? I realized that I miss my dad, the one who wasn't poisoned by narcissism and money and greed. I miss the dad who took me to Home Depot, who let me buy a candy, who took us to Disneyland and camping. It was like, I try to explain this to Mike, but it was like the little girl inside of me missed my daddy. It wasn't the toxic man I missed. It was the dad from my childhood. The one who I still wanted to believe had loved us in his own way. I know he did. I think that his struggles came when we became adults and he no longer was on that pedestal. When I step back and really examine it, I think that's why his relationships thrive so much with children, with the animals that love him, only if they love him, because that's where he gets, you know, his supply. That conflict that I've been having has been with me for months. I've been trying to push it down. I can feel it affecting me in a lot of ways. I've been having these haunting dreams where I was trying to reach him before he passed, but I would always wake up petrified because I ran out of time. I could never get to him. So some dreams I would get there and it was too late. Some dreams, like my legs wouldn't move and I would try to walk down the street and I wouldn't get there. Some days I kept going to the wrong house. It was just crazy. It's been for months like this, like these recurring nightmares. I didn't regret going no contact with him. That's not it. But I have begun to struggle with the idea of him leaving this world without some sort of closure, without some sort of reconciliation. The weight of leaving things unresolved has felt unbearable at times. And I'm very much someone that holds things in. Honestly, every time I've tried to even talk about it a little bit, it's hard to explain, but like someone will change the subject or they won't realize what I'm trying to say. And so I just find myself shutting down again and trying to process all of this internally. Then one day recently, I listened to a podcast by Mel Robbins. She was discussing dealing with narcissists. She said something that struck a deep chord in me. And she said, when dealing with a narcissist, imagine them as a child who experienced something so traumatic that their emotional maturity just halted. Their emotional development, their ability to process their emotions just stopped. It's called arrested development, really. There's actually a term for it. It was as if a light switched on for me that day. It wasn't that long ago. I knew my dad had gone through difficult things. He was abandoned by his own father. He was the oldest boy in the family, left to carry the responsibilities far beyond his years. He had to work. He had brothers and sisters, his mom to take care of. He was very young. I think he was 12 or under. I think the last grade he went to was fourth grade. He used to talk about he used to have to walk to work with no shoes on or holes in his shoes. He used a garbage bag to shield himself from the rain. I can only imagine the things that went through his head during those times. I have to believe that it had something to do with, I'll never let this happen to my kids. I will, I'll never go without. I'll show everybody, kind of like he created this like vitriol back then for showing people, for proving people, for showing people up kind of thing. But at the same time, I do believe that one of the things he vowed was that his kids would never go without and that he would give them everything he didn't have. So while some of that generational trauma he took into his adult life by just having this chaos around him in his adult relationships all the time for as long as I can remember, he did make good on giving us a fairy tale childhood. Like we never went without. We always had the latest and greatest. I always wondered, like, how did he make that happen? The first VCR, trips to Disneyland, trips to camping, the contraptions he would make for us, anything that we could dream of, he would come up with a way to make it, to build it. So in that way, he succeeded. He really did succeed in not passing on that generational trauma. He didn't abandon his family, his kids. He gave us everything. But at the same time, he did carry some of that baggage into his adulthood. That narcissism did embed itself in his soul, and it reared its ugly head in his adult relationships. But hearing Mel Robbins share that the next time you are in this toxic turmoil or thinking about that relationship you have that was so toxic, I want you to imagine that person as an 8-year-old child, traumatized and literally in arrested development right then and there in that trauma. And I couldn't get that image out of my head of my dad as an 8-year-old and that sadness. I felt so bad for him to understand that. To understand that, how it came about. Because I never really got it before, not like this. And that was that really made me have more understanding, for why he is the way he is. And the fact is, I don't know who's listening, family members or not to this, probably nosy people. The whole family, all of his siblings have the trauma, that generational trauma. You can see it in their relationships with their kids, in the way they live their lives. They all have it in some regard. It all manifested a little bit differently, but they all carried some of that trauma. That is how generational trauma is passed on from generation to generation. Carry it, right? I guess the goal is that it dilutes just a little bit more with each generation until it's gone. I'd like to think that it's diluted significantly with our generation, with my cousins, with myself and my siblings for sure, And part of, we have our dad to thank for part of that, because he didn't carry all of his trauma into his life with his family. He made good on some of that with his relationships with his kids, and, not abandoning us, giving us everything, not leaving us in dire straits. So all we can do is continue that, right? Try to dilute it even further in this generation. But just understanding that made a big difference for me. That shift in perspective allowed me to see that in his own way, he tried to be better. He gave us things he never had, Disneyland, camping. He wanted us to have a good childhood. It was his way of trying to be a better father, despite the unresolved pain that he carried. And suddenly I could focus on those moments instead of the years of hurt and anger. We did have a good childhood. And, throughout all of this, I would lean a lot on my brother for counseling. He never made me feel any type of way for my decision to step away. He may have had his own opinions at times, like maybe I should forgive, but he never volunteered the unsolicited advice. But when I asked him if I should go see my dad, I had never asked him that. When I asked him, he said, Janine, you need to go because it will set you free. And I knew he was right. Forgiveness isn't about condoning toxic behavior. That is not what I am telling you guys this story for. It's about releasing myself from the weight of resentment. I didn't want my father's passing to haunt me with the things left unsaid or the emotions left unprocessed. I want to find peace. I can only imagine what then trauma that would be that I would then pass on if I held on to that.
Hey everyone, I am excited to announce that registration for the next round of Jay's Body Bootcamp is officially open. This round is special because it's going to take you through the holiday season when most people struggle to stay on track the most. Imagine heading into the new year strong, confident, and already in your groove of a healthy lifestyle. In these 8 weeks, you'll get everything you need to stay consistent. Simple, effective workouts, a flexible nutrition strategy, and best of all, the support of an incredible community of women working together to stay balanced through the holidays. If you're tired of starting over every January, this round of Body Bootcamp is your chance to break that cycle and start the year ahead of the game.
So this last week, I got a call that my dad had been placed in a home. This is all happening right around the same time, ironically. He'd gotten pretty sick, apparently, and suddenly the clock feels like it was ticking a little louder. I knew I couldn't wait any longer because the nightmares weren't going to go away. Now they're even worse because now that I've decided that, yes, I'm probably going to go see him, now it becomes, oh my gosh, my nightmare is going to come true. I've decided I'm going to go see him, and then he's not there. So I knew this might be my only chance to see him. I don't know how much time he has left. You just never know. And I needed to make sure I had some kind of resolution. The idea of visiting him in a neutral place, not in the home I grew up in, the home I see every day when I drive down the street, where I'd cared for him for those 2 horrible years, it somehow made it easier. It was a fresh space, a new setting. I think I needed that. This was the sign. This is the sign that I needed to go. But I mean, listen, if anyone knows me, I avoid conflict. I avoid confrontation. I shut down and I run in the other direction. I do not like, to a fault. It is not a good trait, but it is how I deal with things by not dealing with things. So it was difficult. It was the nightmares, honestly, that got me to go. Just not wanting to have not a single another nightmare that could potentially come true. So I went. I was scared, honestly. I didn't know what to expect. Part of me feared he'd reject me or lash out with some of the same bitterness I experienced in the past. I mean, you never knew what you were going to get with him. So, man, that anxiety was welling up inside me. I could feel the cortisol levels rising. But I had been told that he's been in and out of clarity. So then I thought maybe he won't even remember me, which that made me really sad too. I didn't know what I wanted at this point. I had all these worries swirling around as I walked up to the house. But the moment I saw him, he looked up at me and he said, "Merry Christmas." It was a little joke he'd always used, something that felt oddly familiar and comforting, because he usually said that when he was in a good mood. It was usually like a tell that he was in a good mood. Then he looked at me and he said, "I knew you'd come." He said, "I knew you'd come." And he kind of started talking to himself a little bit. And he said, "I knew you'd come because I wasn't a bad father when you were kids. I've been lying here thinking, did I do enough? Was I a good enough dad that she'd come see me before I died?" And I thought, I think I did enough. This is what he was saying. I just grabbed his hand. I looked him in the eyes and I said, "That's why I'm here. To let you know that you were a good dad and that you did give us a good life." He looked relieved, almost childlike. He said, "Listen," with a lot of clarity, he said this. I thought, wow, he's more there than I expected him to be. I'm glad I didn't know that he was still this coherent. I might have been a little more reluctant. Because then he said, "Let's not talk about anything that happened. Let's just let it go. I'm happy you're here, and now I want to live a little longer." Now, mind you, I will say, as good as that sounds, and it was a beautiful moment, it still scares me because it's not very different from the way he would act after some of the raging toxicity when I would care for him. He would pull me back in by turning into this person. And that's how it lasted so long. I mean, that's why my mom stayed married to him. It becomes it's kind of like a abusive relationship, you know? So while I thoroughly cherish the moment, I'm scared that it's almost like I don't want to go back so that I could leave it like this and make without a shadow of a doubt that it stays like this. But I don't think I could do that either. So there is still that fear. It was a moment I hadn't imagined, and it left me feeling so many emotions: relief, sadness, gratitude. I didn't think I could feel both peace and sadness so strongly at the same time. The truth is, I think I held on to my anger all these months because it felt like a shield, like armor, you know, something to protect me from the deeper grief that I knew was coming. And while I still feel sadness about what was and what's ahead, I also feel clarity, like a weight I've carried for years has finally lifted. Now listen, I do not regret going no contact. It is what I needed to do at the time to protect my mental health. It was my only choice, and because I went no contact is leading to this moment where we could potentially end on a very positive, beautiful note. And I don't think that would have been possible had I not gone no contact. It was extremely toxic, toxic beyond what I could even explain or ever share. But I won't pretend I made every decision perfectly. There are things I wish I'd understood sooner, things I would have done differently if I'd known. And if you're still listening, I want to share a few lessons and tips I've learned about navigating a relationship such as this, especially with a parent, about finding forgiveness and setting yourself free. I do want to point out, although I feel like I made the right decision in going no contact, because of my tendency to want to just avoid conflict and not deal, I do have some guilt because when I stepped out, initially everybody kind of stepped out, but my sister re-entered the equation. And I selfishly was very grateful for that because although I didn't want to be the one taking care of him, I certainly didn't want him to suffer, to be alone. I wanted him to be happy and live as long as possible and be well cared for. I just didn't want it to be me or have anything to do with it. And I don't know if that makes any sense to any of you, but that's how I felt. So selfishly, I was happy, but I was also very guilty about it. Because as much as my sister likes to put on rose-colored glasses and act like everything is fine and it was like a bed of roses, I can only imagine that it must not have been. I also never reached out to her to ask her if she was okay. I was almost afraid to do that because I would feel even more guilt. And I was deep down inside, I felt this urge to go back and this urge to go endure again. And honestly, if it weren't for my family, I would have. But this was so disturbing for like my son, his mental health, that I stayed away because they wouldn't let me crumble and go back. But I had a lot of guilt for that, and I wanted to almost pretend like it wasn't happening at all. So in doing that, I avoided communicating with a lot of family, to be honest. First and foremost, if you are dealing with a narcissistic parent, you have to protect your mental health. Sometimes distance is the best way to care for yourself. If you are feeling drained, depleted, emotionally overwhelmed, it is okay to prioritize your mental well-being. Taking a step back doesn't mean you don't love them. So, again, I want to say that I don't regret taking a step back. I don't regret that. It was the right move, and it might be the right move for you. You have to protect your mental health because without it, then what? I will also say that what can help is if you focus on the good. Even when it's hard, it's easy to let the painful memories overshadow everything else. But if you can find even small moments that brought you joy or love, hold on to those moments. Those memories can help balance out your perspective, and they can remind you that life, like people, is complex and multifaceted. So that helped me a lot, focusing on the good, thinking about the good times, which is a lot of the advice that my brother had given me. Because for me, it was focusing on my childhood, because there was a lot of good times. My dad made it so that we had a good childhood. Number three, the third tip I would give, and this is a really important one because this is what I wish I would have been better at, and that is to set boundaries without guilt. When it comes to a narcissistic parent, boundaries are crucial. You have to decide what behaviors you will not tolerate, set limits on the time you spend together if necessary, be clear of what you need to protect yourself emotionally. Boundaries aren't punishments, they're safeguards. And let me tell you this, it will help you and them because without boundaries, they will take things too far and they'll have regrets too because they don't want to push you completely out. They like to pull back just when you're at your breaking point so that they don't end up alone. So they know how to reel you back in. The boundaries that you set, if they're solid, it will help you keep the peace longer. If I would have set boundaries early on and thought, you know what, I cannot take care of you, I'm just going to come and visit, and that is it. He'd have been mad for a while, but I think it would have been okay ultimately, and we would have figured it out as a family. I did not do that, and because of that, I let it get to a head where there's no turning back. This was explosive. It was bad. He did things that I felt were unforgivable. And it pushed me to my breaking point where, there came a point where I thought I'm going to lose it and be physically violent or something, which is not me at all. But, so again, that was a big mistake I made. So if that's something that you're in this situation, set boundaries and stick to them. Get your family members to help you stick to them. I don't know if I did finally obviously go no contact, but like I said, it was my family members that held me accountable to that decision. And I do not regret it. I want to make that clear. Because I went back and because I've forgiven and because, I love my dad and we had a great childhood, but I do not regret it. And I don't regret that. I don't think I should have gone any sooner. I think this is probably the soonest that I could have gone for it to potentially be safely good from here on out. But I still have to be careful. He's still coherent enough where I have to be careful. And I have to set boundaries and time limits and walk on eggshells, basically, a little bit. What does that sound like? Sounds like my old life a little bit. But I do have to navigate this situation very carefully because I do want peace. My next tip is to acknowledge the trauma they carried. This is huge, okay? This was the critical turning point for me. This helped me so much. You have to remember that narcissism stems from unresolved trauma. It does not excuse their actions, though. It doesn't give them an excuse, but it can help you understand the reasons behind what they do. This understanding can bring a sense of peace and compassion to you, especially if forgiveness feels like an insurmountable step at this moment. And it might be for you for now. Also, it's important to allow yourself to feel sadness and anger. This was big for me for a while. I was kind of mad at myself when I started to feel the sadness creep in. You don't have to feel angry or sad. You can feel both. You don't have to be positive all the time or rush to forgiveness for that matter. Acknowledge every emotion that comes up, whether it's anger, sadness, nostalgia. I've had a lot of the nostalgia lately. The path to healing is often messy, and all of those feelings are valid, and it doesn't negate the other. Because you're nostalgic and have fond memories of your childhood, it doesn't negate the things that were done to you as an adult. But it can help you to soften. And that's just a better place to be for your own mental health, if for nothing else. Forgiveness is for you. It's not for them. Letting go of resentment doesn't mean you condone their actions. It doesn't mean you're releasing the emotional hold they have over you. Forgiveness is about finding peace for yourself, not about excusing their behavior. Seek support when you need it. Okay, whether it's therapy, support groups, friends, do not hesitate to reach out for help. Sharing your story and hearing others' experiences can be incredibly healing and affirming. And be open to revisiting your choices. Be open to revisiting your choices. Okay, sometimes we make choices out of survival. Later on, we may feel ready to shift or reconnect. And I'll give you an example of that. When I went no contact, I thought that's it. That's it. I'm done. There was times where my brother would ask, like, do you think you'll see him at the end when he's dying? I said, nope. And he would ask me, do you think you're going to the funeral? And I said, nope. So just because I made that choice at that moment doesn't mean that that it's not okay to let myself revisit those choices. You have to be kind to yourself because the choices you made were part of your healing, and it's a journey. You have the right to change your mind when it feels right. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And you know what? When I said find support, be cautious where you find your support. Sometimes the best support comes from complete strangers. A support group that has no affiliations at all with your family, a therapist. Be very careful who you confide in because not everybody has your best interests at heart. I know in my situation, I almost can feel the chatter about me. I'm very in tune with energy, but I've also really resolved to the fact that I don't really care what people think. The only thing that matters is that I'm okay with my decisions and that I'm processing my traumas and I'm living my truth. That's all I care about. I really do not care what people think. If I did, probably wouldn't be recording this show right now, would I? I'm recording it because if I help just one person by sharing my story, it will be worth it for me. A complete stranger, helping a complete stranger. That's what gives me my purpose in life. It fills my cup selfishly. So be okay with revisiting your choices. You're not, set in stone. You can change your mind. Look for the lessons and the growth, because even through pain, there's growth. If you can find meaning in this journey, like learning resilience or empathy, or maybe helping somebody else, it can transform your experience. I think that's what I'm trying to do. As traumatic as this has been, if my experience can help somebody else, maybe it takes a little bit of, it has purpose. It had a purpose. It had a meaning. Use the growth to shape the way you live and the relationships you choose to build. Think about how you are going to be different, how you are going to further dilute this generational trauma so that you're not continuing to pass it on. Now, look, my dad did do that, and I'm going to give him credit for that. But there's still work to be done. And there's still things that we can do in our generation to now my kids that I know of what I don't want to do and what I don't want to be and how I don't want to act, especially in my final days. So if you're navigating a difficult relationship with a parent or someone you love, know that you are not alone. This journey is personal, but there is peace to be found. Sometimes it's not about changing the past, but about reshaping the way we carry forward. That's huge for me because I can't change the past, and I don't think I really would change the past. I wouldn't change very much. But I can change the way I carry this burden going forward. Thanks for letting me share, this piece of my heart with you guys. Remember, forgiveness is a gift for yourself more than anything. Until next time, be kind to yourself. And I really truly hope that this has helped somebody. Feel free to find me on social media and share your story, or if this has impacted you in any way. My information is down in the description. I also have a membership site on my YouTube channel. I will be having an after show for this episode over on YouTube. So if you're a part of my inner circle and you want to hear a little bit more, head over there and check out the after show for this episode. And again, thank you guys so much. I mean, this was not a very easy episode for me to record. And I do want to say this. For those of you who might be listening to this episode with not the best intentions, with the intention to spread gossip or get the scoop or the juice, you might want to spend a little more time focusing on your own relationships and your own family. And you might want to ask yourself, why is it that this situation bothers you so much? Could it be that you identify with it a little bit? Could it be that you see yourself in this situation? Could it be that you fear that these are the kind of relationships maybe you've developed with your children? Maybe you can learn from it too. I'm okay with that. I want to help. Anyways, thank you guys so much. And I'll see you guys on the next episode in the new studio, and hopefully with all new vibes and energy. Thank you.